Hi, it's Graham Healy from Rise Up Australia, Brisbane 2025. I thought I'd just do a quick video and just notice the placard I've got in the background, and it says, "I support Israel because I have a functioning brain." Trouble is that most of these people I've seen on the Free Palestine marches, marching, mind you, this is across Sydney Harbour Bridge and some in Brisbane and Melbourne, marching with Hamas flags, marching with known terrorists, marching with, Ayatollah Khomeini's photograph held up high, marching with, as I say, foreign flags, nothing to do with Australia. And as a result, of course, this went on for 2 years and resulted in Jew hatred, not unlike the hatred in Nazi Germany in World War II. Same spirit, just different bodies with the same spirit. And the absolutely pathetic, weak, gutless, I won't even call him a prime minister, the grub that is in Parliament House at the moment in the form of Albanese, who himself was pro-Palestine, and there's, photographs of him at pro-Palestine marches and all this, and they rave on about stupid things. These are brainless people. And why I support Israel, and people who've got any intelligence support Israel, including Donald Trump in the United States and all his members of Congress and what have you, and many presidents before him, and including, even Bob Hawke supported Israel. Bob Hawke had have a major coroner if he is still alive. So you know what I mean. We've just got a complete, absolute idiot in charge of Australia, but he's a dangerous idiot because he's trying to cover his backside regarding a royal commission. After the massacre at Bondi, there's no excuse. No excuse whatsoever. This was building up for 2 years. We all saw it happening, various attacks on Jewish centres, and it was all Islamic terrorism. There's terror cells all through Australia. We've got to call in the army and flush them out and send them over to Christmas Island and deal with them in the new year. But my feeling is that the terrorism acts aren't over. But one thing I do know that's over, and that's Albanese's reign over Australia. Forget about him going to the end of the term. That's a joke. He's not going to make it past New Year, I don't think. Anyway, just quickly, a lot of people, they just go anti-Israel. Why is that? Why is it? Is it because they haven't got a functioning brain? I think it is, actually, because any fool doesn't have to think real, spend a lot of time thinking about this, but you've just got to ask yourself, do you or do you not agree with terrorism? Do you or do you not agree with Islamic terrorism? If you don't, then you'd be pro-Israel. And all this rubbish that they carry on, like running down these rabbit holes with Mossad and all this sort of stuff, the Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service. I'll tell you what, you'd want them on your side when you're fighting terrorism. And they won't let these characters get away with it. Everyone else just sits and watches in the Western world, except for Donald Trump, of course. He's sorting them out. But in Australia, I'm embarrassed to be in Australia watching what has gone on over the last 2 years. We stood up against the so-called Free Palestine. See, the idiots that go on these marches, you've got, when you had a look at them, had a look at the one over Sydney Harbour Bridge, terrorist flags everywhere. And, all these fools are thinking they're saving kids or something like this in a war zone. They're not saving anyone. They're actually promoting terrorism. And this is the thing that the government of the day should have shut them down before they even began. And, you just have a look at the definitions of free speech, even though we haven't got that officially in the Constitution in Australia, but I've got it on Rise Up Australia Brisbane. You know, I've got the links to the government site and that. And it clearly states that it's okay for free speech as long as it isn't hate speech, as long as it isn't inciting violence, as long as it isn't discriminating. All of this, hate speech, inciting violence, discriminating against Jews especially, all happened over the last 2 years. In fact, these Islamic terrorists and hate preachers celebrating on the steps of the Sydney Opera House regarding the 7th of October massacre in Israel. And, some of these idiots who have marched in these marches, right, these useful idiots who can't even look up on the internet what's going on, you should go over to Israel. You should go over and live in Palestine if you want to and see what the story is, to see how they indoctrinate from a very early age and use even their own children as, suicide bombers and all this sort of stuff. I've got connections in the army and all this sort of thing. People have been over on many trips to these countries and have seen it, seen what happens. And even in, all the money that's been poured into so-called Palestine, which is not a state. It's just it's an area where they promoted terrorism. All the money that's been poured in there hasn't gone to any infrastructure. It's gone to terror tunnels. It's gone in the hands, including the aid that even Israel and other countries put in there, doesn't make it to the people. The people are totally at the mercy of Hamas, who've run the place for the last 10 years or longer. So, Israel moved out 10 years ago. And what did they do in that 10 years? Well, they just built terror tunnels and rocket launchers. Their objective, Islamic objective, is to wipe out Israel. And anyone who attended, the so-called pro-Palestine marches, including Albanese, wanted the same thing. When they talk genocide or to the river, to the sea, or death, the IDF, and all this rubbish they go on with, what that means is wiping out Israel. Now, believe you me, Islam, if they wipe out, which I'll never do, well, they wipe out Israel, the Christians are on the chopping block next, and then all the LBGD agendas, they're on the chopping block after that. Read the Quran, you fools. So that's enough of a bit of a rant about those idiots, just completely brain dead. And as I say, I support Israel. Why? Because I've got a functioning brain and I know what goes on there. I know what happens over in the Middle East. I've got connections in the Middle East, right? So, okay, getting back to, I'll just finish on this. People go on, well, they're occupying, the Israelis are occupying. Occupying where? Israel, for God's sake. Thousands of years of history. Read the Bible, for goodness sake. Read the Dead Sea Scrolls. Read all the other evidence that's been displayed there. These are God's original people, for goodness sake. So, just look up on the internet and they go on about Zionists. They must find Zionists under the bed or something like that. It's like the boogeyman or something. This is simply Zion. I'll just read it to you. Just go, look on the internet. What does Zionist mean in the Bible? Look it up. I'll read it to you. In the Bible, Zion refers to Jerusalem. Oh, the land promised to the Jewish people, forming the religious foundation for Zionism. Zion is Jerusalem. The movement for Jewish self-determination in the ancestral homeland rooted in covenants like Abraham's Genesis 12:3, which basically says those that bless Israel will be blessed. Those that curse Israel will be cursed. And Deuteronomy 3:3, well, I'll just read Deuteronomy 3:3 to you, just in case you can't read. Here it is here, Deuteronomy 3:3, and it says that the Lord God, that is, the Lord God will bring you back from captivity and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where the Lord your God has scattered you. So in other words, in the scriptures, this is Deuteronomy, and then over in Jeremiah 31:8 says, behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the ends of the earth, among them the blind and the lame, the woman and child, and the one who labours with child together. A great throng shall return here. So in other words, the Lord scattered them and the Lord brought them back. And for those other ignorant parties, regarding Arabs, right? Now, Abraham, the Abraham Accord. You've heard Donald Trump go on about the Abrahamic Accords, right? Look that up on the where is it here? It's on the state government website in the USA. The Abrahamic Accords, because get it through your head, Abraham was the father also of the Arab race. So Israelis and Arabs have the same father, historically speaking. So, Abraham had the son called Ishmael to his servant, one of his servants, right? And then, of course, the legitimate son was Abraham had Isaac, the illegitimate son. So, the Arabs and the Jews are actually related. And to say that the Jews don't belong in Jerusalem and all this Zionist rubbish that goes on and all this Mossad, this is Mossad, that. I'll tell you what, if it wasn't for Mossad, you'd have terrorists ruling the world. So you want to think about that very carefully. Anyway, I'll just finish off with this. At the end of the day, in Australia, we have to purge this country of terrorism, Islamic terrorism. Those who don't understand Islam, now I'm not saying all Muslims are bad people, well, they're not. But those who take literally what the Quran, and there's 3 books, they have 3 books, Quran's just one of them. But if you read the Quran, and it clearly instructs them to destroy the Jews and the infidels, that's everyone else. So they're a very aggressive, expansive death cult. That's the best way to put it. And, don't be surprised if more terrorist attacks don't happen in Australia before we call in the army. What's really got to happen, I've said this on some other videos that I've done, and I'll finish off with this. Number one, I'm backing Israel because I've got a functioning brain, number 2. And anyone can learn the history of Israel. Number 3, historically, the Israeli people go back to the land, to the core father of the faith, which is Abraham, who, by the way, is also the father of the Arab race. And they know that. Some of the Arab countries acknowledge that Israel has as much right to that land as they have to their various parts, of the Middle East. But there's no taking it away that Israel belongs in Jerusalem. Zion equals Jerusalem, for goodness sake. Look it up and show some sort of intelligence. But anyway, I'll finish off on this. At the end of the day, it's God himself who said he'd bring the Israelis back to Zion or Jerusalem. And when you read about in Revelations, when the Lord comes back, where is he coming back to? What, Hong Kong or somewhere? No, he's coming back to Zion. He's coming back to Jerusalem. That is where the whole new setup will be when the Lord comes back. So, you want to read the latter part of the Bible. Now, regarding the Quran, the Quran was put together AD 610 to 632, so 600 years after Jesus was crucified. So that puts it in a bit of perspective. Their little leader was a warlord. who, by the way, slaughtered about the 500 Jews that taught him all the stuff, taught him all the Old Testament, right? He decided to go out and behead them all. And so that spirit of murder is right throughout Islam. And that's basically it. That's why you've got terrorism. It is not a religion of peace. It is a religion of, well, it's a death cult, really. You know, death cult to anyone else that's not in it. And the things that they do to women and all that, have a look at it. Have a look at Sharia law. Have a look what they do to someone who leaves the cult. Very, very dangerous. And in Australia, it shouldn't be here. We have to flush it out now. If you know, someone of a Muslim faith that isn't sticking to Sharia law and the extremist fundamental Islam that wants to have a safe life, fair enough. And there's plenty of those people here in Australia. But unfortunately, the current idiotic government under Albanese has actually seeded this country with terrorists, especially over the last 2 years. There's terror cells everywhere, and it has to be flushed out. I believe the army has to be brought into it. And believe you me, the terrorism in Australia is not over yet. They don't care. They don't care. You know, you can take back every gun in Australia and lock it in a cupboard, or get the little, the safety bins out and get all the criminals to throw their knives in the safety bins. This is insane. You know, I've never seen anything so stupid in all my life. We need real leadership in this country, and the only way we're going to get that is have a double dissolution, referendum on free speech. And as I said before, probably the new Prime Minister should be Josh Frydenberg, and the leader of the Liberal Party, forget Susan Ley, for God's sake, give us a break. Resign now, Susan Ley, and Andrew Hasey's the man, right? There are several other people that I think should be in a mixed parliament. Certainly none of the Greens, certainly none of the Labor. They should all kicked out. You know, they're complicit, absolutely complicit in supporting terrorism. Why? Because Albanese signed off on the Free Palestine, or the Palestine agreement, where they're recognising Palestine as a state. I mean, this fool has actually met up with Yasser Arafat, the global terrorist, for goodness sake. And people in these marches, they're wearing Yasser Arafat tea cloths, I call them. So, you know, the writing's on the wall. It's all over Red Rover. That's Graham Healy's rant for today. And look, you know, enough is enough. We've had enough. Let's get rid of this government. Let's call a double dissolution. Let's call a referendum on free speech. And let's purge this country, not of the good Muslim people. There are good Muslim people who don't believe in terrorism. But the trouble is, the book that they're adhering to states that. So this you've got to make it very clear that if you're in Australia, you're not going to adhere to what the good old Quran's telling you to do to the infidels and the Jews. This is especially a big issue. And those that touch the Jews are cursed by God. Albanese, you're cursed by God. Doesn't matter what you do, the curse will run you out of government. Oh boy. So that's it. Over and out. Graham Healy, Rise Up Australia, Brisbane. Have a great day. And let's get rid of this hopeless government we've got in charge and start afresh with some sort of leadership that at least lines up with what Donald Trump's doing. He's not going to muck around with terrorism, is he? Okay, Graham Healy over and out. Have a great day.